Okay, so what is a work plan? I tend to do these using an online tool called Lucidchart. You could use a pencil and paper. You could use a Word document. I like flow diagrams, so that's what I'm going to do. I'll show you one of my other flow diagrams just for a second, so you can kind of see what I mean. Let me just go back to my documents here for a second. For bigger projects, it can be really helpful. So, for instance, my workflow for one of my clients was the solar guy or the solar thing we just did. This is one of my workflows where I say, okay, here's the raw data, here are the tools, here's all the intermediary files, and this is how we arrive at our kind of quote unquote solution. So I'm not looking for anything this complicated, but we would like to see something where it's, you're trying to do this so that you can at least come up with a plan. If you don't want to do a workflow diagram, you could do bullet points in an outline or something like that. But I'm going to walk you through my work plan for this lab, just for doing our selection, just looking for the police incidents around the riot after George Floyd on May 31st in Boston. So what I'd like to do, I think what I want to do is I want to create a visual. Let's just say at this point, all I know at the end is I want to make a JPEG, and I want that JPEG to be a map. So the JPEG is going to be something I export from Q, and it's going to be a map. Oopsie. And it's going to be a JPEG. Okay. So I know that's my goal. That's where we're going to end up. And I think I want that map to look like, I think it's going to be either a heat map or a dot map. So something involving the points, the point cloud that we're going to select. And I know that I'm going to start with my database. So I've got this incidents. It's a CSV file. And so I'm going to write that it's a CSV file. And I know I want to get from this to that somehow. So the work plan is kind of like my envisioning how I'm going to get to that map. So the first thing I know I need to do is I need to change the CSV file into a into a point file. So I think what I would do is I would use a tool, and I'm going to use a tool where I load delimited text layer, and that's going to let me bring in that and use it as and one of the parameters will be a Latin long. And so once I use that, it should allow me to make a shapefile. So I want to create something incidents, and I want that to be a shapefile. So that should be one of my first steps. But I have another database that I'm interested in. It's the arrests database. And so I kind of want to also look at that. I'm not sure what I want to do with it yet, but I think it might be interesting. So I've got my arrests CSV, and I need to run another tool to get it to join and kind of talk to this file. If you haven't done a join, that's part of the videos we'll get to. I'll show you how to do a join. But so I'm going to symbolize that ultimately I want to join these together. So I'm going to take these incidents like this, and we're going to do we're going to do a join. And a lot of times the join will take that table and it will hold it in virtual memory. But if you want it to stick to the file, you have to save it as a new file. So after I do the join, I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to make a new shapefile. And usually what I do is I just say, okay, that's going to be called, incidents, maybe and arrests or something like that. And I could come up with a better naming scheme, but that's okay for my little chart here. Yeah, I'm okay with that. So incidents and arrests. So when I get that, the problem is that it's going to be one giant point file for the entire year, right? I'm going to have an entire year worth of incidents and arrests all in one shapefile with points all over the place. But what do I really want? I want a dot map, but my dot map is going to show what is it going to show? It's going to show just the day potentially of May 31st. So what is a tool that I need to use? I'm hoping throughout this course that you've started to kind of be able to think about the tools and what they do a little bit more hypothetically, and that's kind of the point of this exercise. I'm going to do a select by attribute, and I want to select all of the points in this file, and I might add a parameter here. So one of the parameters, I'm just going to write that this is some of my parameters here, and maybe I ought to make this a smaller. Maybe we'll make it a 12-point thing here. So some of my parameters for this are going to be, I want it to be in where the month equals May, which is probably going to be the 5th month, obviously. So that'll be 05. And I also want the day to equal 31, because that's the last day of May. And that was based on some research I did when I read the article. I read that it was on a Sunday night. The article came out on the 1st of June, and so it was referencing the night before, and that's how I came up with that day. So I think if I select for May, and day equals 31, so you have to do, we'll have to figure out how that's going to look in our, have to figure out how that's going to look in our querying, kind of our SQL thing there. So I think I'm going to actually just go like that. That's good. Month equals 05 and day equals 31. So once I do that, I'm going to make a selection, and I can either do that in the file and have it be a query, or I can save it as a new file. In this case, I'm going to just save it as a new file. So let's just see if I save that as a new file, because I might want to run a tool on it. I might want to do a heat map or something. So I'm going to add another save as here, and that save as is going to be, we'll call this, I'm going to start calling this incidents and arrests, and this is going to be for May 31, like that. Cool. So then I have that. I may or may not run some kind of heat map tool. I'm not sure if that's going to be interesting yet. I could say, here's a question right here. Heat map, not sure yet, but that may or may not produce an output, which would be a raster. And so this would be incident frequency. And I'm not sure about that. I think I want to explore that. So this is something where, we may run different renditions of it. We're not really sure. But we do know we probably will end up using this in some kind of cartographic fashion. At least I think I will. And so how am I going to get, now that I have the points for that day, how am I going to get it to this, right? Well, I probably want a base map. And so my base map is going to be some data that I download, perhaps. And it will be like, maybe it's just roads, maybe it's roads and buildings if I want to show specifically the downtown area. So maybe it's roads and buildings. And then maybe I don't do too much with it. Maybe I just do some symbology, Let's just see. This is my program. So this is kind of QGIS layout. And then maybe I want to say, I'm going to do a little, like this. And I'm going to say symbolize. And then maybe this goes straight to the layout. And maybe this guy up here, I'm also going to categorize that maybe. So I've got my arrest points, and maybe I want those arrest points to be categorized by incident type, or as the law enforcement officers would call it, crime type. So maybe I want to do a categorical, classification, and that's in the symbology tab. And then I also want to do that, and after it comes out of this, I'm going to do some basic symbology. Let's see. This isn't a very clean workflow, but that's kind of why we do them, is that they're messy. And then we're going to symbolize like that. And that's starting to look a little better here. So I've got some base map features, and I'm going to symbolize. And then when we get to that, what do? We're going to probably export things as SVGs. And so I'm going to export those as vector base map layers, maybe. And that's an SVG file. And I'm kind of just blazing through this, but I hope you can kind of see that it shouldn't be too hard to do if you want to take a pencil and paper and kind of do it out. And then I'm going to use Illustrator. Let's see. Illustrator. And then I'll end up exporting out of Illustrator as a JPEG. And this is pretty. I'd like to see a little bit more detail than this, but not much. I think something close to this would be good, so that you can we can at least see your thought process that this dot map is going to be something that shows a categorized selection of points, and maybe there's a categorical classification. If I was going to spend more time on this, what I would do is I would write I could at least write some kind of description of what I imagine it's going to be. So here I might write a categorical dot map, or perhaps a heat map that show different types of criminal, maybe not criminal, it's kind of a loaded word. That's what it's, of different types of incidents, there we go, on the night in question. So that's my goal, right? And I know that's where I want to head. This is how I think I'm going to get there. I may find, I'm actually thinking already that the categories are going to be more numerous. I'll show you when we get there, but there's going to be probably 3 or 4 dozen different categories of crime incidents. And so I may need to create a statement in here somewhere that simplifies that classification, because it gets as detailed as there's different types of assault. There's 5 or 6 different types of assault. I may just want to look at just assault and just categorize that all as one thing. So I think this categorical classification could be more complicated. I'm not sure what I'm going to experience there yet. So one way to deal with that is to just say, okay, we expect this to be a little bit of an iterative process, perhaps, something where we say classification schemes. I think if we see your workflow and you have tons of these things, we'll ask you to clarify, because maybe that's showing that you're not thinking through too much. But occasionally, this is normal. It's normal to have parts of your workflow where you don't quite know how you're going to get there, but you have an idea. And the important thing is that you have an idea about how to get from beginning to end. And this last product here, really, this is a design concept. And it's kind of important to try to think of it as a design concept, because without some kind of concept for how something's going to end up, we end up just lost in the woods and lost in the weeds, kind of throwing data around and not sure how it's going to develop. So geovisualization is kind of, I think, a lot of this iterative process up here. But ultimately, cartography should be the process of taking this and finally ending up with a set, kind of a set number of layers, or a set output that you know you want to symbolize. And then the cartography really should be mostly about the symbolization and how to make the data you've arrived at kind of, I don't want to say sing, but make it show, make it show itself the most effectively, in the most effective way that you can. So that's kind of a basics on just creating a workflow diagram. Definitely show kind of as many parameters as you think are useful. I think that what I've provided here might be closer to on a scale of 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, this is closer to maybe a 2 or a 2.5. I think if you wanted a 3 out of this, this is in lieu of the quiz this week, just do a little bit more parameterization and kind of writing. And if you don't have a scanner, you can, honestly just take a couple pictures with your phone, or you can, if you're going to do it in paper and pencil, that is. If you want to use Lucidchart is actually free. You can do, I think, up to 3 diagrams on Lucidchart, and it's kind of an effective way to learn how to make flow diagrams. And you could also use Illustrator, though I find it's harder because you can't just easily connect objects and things. You can't connect objects as easily in Illustrator as you can in Lucidchart. So similarly, if you want to do a, like I said before, the diagrammatic kind of outline, just make sure your outline is hierarchical, it's sensible, try to clean it up so it doesn't have to be color-coded necessarily, but just make it digestible so that when we read it, we can think of this, if this is, we can understand what your workflow is, even if it's in verbal form. So good luck with that. I hope this was helpful. The next video, I'm going to actually try to enact this workflow, and we'll see how it goes.